You ever notice how the people who seem most at peace aren't the ones who've figured everything out? They're the ones who've stopped trying to. There's this quiet confidence they carry, this way of moving through life that doesn't require constant validation or endless analysis. They don't need every situation to make perfect sense before they can act. They don't need every emotion to have a backstory. They just exist, and somehow that's enough. Meanwhile, most of us are out here treating life like it's a puzzle we're supposed to solve. We're constantly trying to decode why things happen, what they mean, where they're leading. We overthink every decision, replay every conversation, and exhaust ourselves trying to understand the deeper meaning behind every moment. It's like we've convinced ourselves that if we just think hard enough, analyze deep enough, we'll finally crack the code and everything will make sense. But here's the thing nobody talks about. The more you try to understand everything, the more complicated everything becomes. The more you need things to make sense, the more senseless they feel. You're not getting clarity by demanding it. You're creating chaos by refusing to accept that some things just are what they are. Think about it. When was the last time overthinking actually solved anything? When has analyzing every possible angle of a situation ever led to the perfect answer? When has demanding to know why something happened ever actually changed what happened? The truth is, most of the time, we're not even trying to understand. We're trying to control. We think if we can just figure out the pattern, predict the outcome, map every variable, we'll somehow be able to manage life like a spreadsheet. But life isn't a spreadsheet. It's not a machine you can troubleshoot or a system you can optimize. It's messy, unpredictable, and beautifully chaotic. And the people who've learned to work with that chaos instead of against it, they're the ones who seem to have it all figured out, even though they've actually stopped trying to figure anything out. See, there's a difference between thinking and overthinking. Real thinking is purposeful. It has a direction, a goal, an endpoint. You think about something, you reach a conclusion, you act on it, and you move forward. Overthinking is just mental noise. It's your brain running in circles, burning energy without going anywhere. It's like having a car stuck in mud with the engine revving. Lots of sound, lots of heat, zero progress. The crazy part is, we've been trained to believe that more thinking equals better outcomes. That if we just consider every angle, weigh every option, prepare for every possibility, we'll somehow arrive at the perfect decision. But perfect decisions don't exist. And even if they did, the time you spend trying to find them is time you're not spending actually living. Here's what actually happens when you stop needing everything to make sense. You start noticing what's actually happening instead of what you think should be happening. You stop fighting reality and start working with it. You realize that most problems solve themselves when you stop feeding them with excessive mental energy. You discover that your first instinct is usually right, and that the longer you think about something, the more you contaminate that instinct with doubt and fear. Your relationships change too. When you're not constantly trying to decode every text message, analyze every conversation, or figure out exactly what someone meant by their tone, you become present. Actually present. You're not mentally rehearsing what you're going to say next, or wondering if you said the wrong thing 5 minutes ago. You're just there, in the moment, connected to what's actually happening, instead of what your mind is making up about what's happening. The anxiety that used to consume you starts dissolving, not because your life becomes problem-free, but because you stop creating problems that don't exist. You realize how much of your stress was self-manufactured, how many of your worries were just mental entertainment that served no purpose except to keep you stuck in your own head. Something else shifts too. Your decision-making becomes lightning fast. When you're not caught up in endless mental loops, analyzing every possible outcome, second-guessing yourself into paralysis, you start making choices from a place of clarity. Your gut instinct becomes your compass again. You remember what it feels like to trust yourself, to move with confidence instead of hesitation. People around you start noticing immediately. They can't put their finger on it at first, but something's different about your energy. You're not carrying that heavy mental baggage anymore. You're not dragging everyone into your analysis paralysis. You become someone who acts decisively, who doesn't need to process every minor detail out loud. And this creates a ripple effect. When you stop overthinking, you stop being the person who needs constant reassurance. You stop being the one who turns every small decision into a group discussion. Your creativity explodes. All that mental energy you were wasting on overthinking gets redirected into actually creating, building, moving forward. You start having ideas again, real ideas, not the kind that get immediately shot down by your inner critic, but the kind that excite you, that make you want to take action. Your sleep improves dramatically because you're not lying in bed replaying conversations from 3 years ago or planning out scenarios that will never happen. Your mind actually gets to rest, and when your mind rests, your body follows. But perhaps the most profound change is this: you start living in reality instead of in your head. You begin to see situations for what they actually are, not what your overactive imagination makes them out to be. This clarity is like having a superpower. You can navigate life with precision instead of stumbling through it blindfolded by your own thoughts. The world becomes simpler, not because it actually changes, but because you stop complicating it. You realize that most situations have straightforward solutions, that most people mean exactly what they say, that most problems resolve themselves when you stop feeding them with excessive mental energy. You become someone others want to be around because calm, decisive energy is contagious. You're not draining people with your mental chaos anymore. You're not seeking constant validation or reassurance. You become a source of stability instead of a source of stress. Here's what's really fascinating though. The change isn't about becoming indifferent or disconnected. It's about becoming more present, more engaged, more alive. When you're not lost in mental mazes, you're actually more available for real connection, real experience, real life. You stop thinking your way through life and start living your way through it. The people who seem untouchable by life's chaos have learned something crucial. They've figured out that most decisions are reversible. Most problems are temporary. Most of the things we worry about never actually happen. They understand that taking imperfect action is infinitely better than perfect inaction. This doesn't mean being reckless or impulsive. It means recognizing that your brain isn't always your friend. It's designed to keep you safe, which means it's constantly scanning for threats, problems, and worst-case scenarios. It's like having a paranoid security guard in your head who sees danger everywhere. This was useful when we lived in caves and had to worry about actual predators, but in modern life, it's just exhausting. The security guard in your head will always find something to worry about, because that's his job. He doesn't care if you're happy or peaceful or productive. He cares about keeping you alive. And in his mind, the best way to do that is to make you hyper-aware of every possible threat, no matter how remote or imaginary. So when you catch yourself overthinking, you're not dealing with rational thought. You're dealing with ancient programming that's completely out of sync with your actual reality. You're letting a caveman run your modern life. And that's why everything feels so complicated and overwhelming. The solution isn't to think harder or better. It's to think less, to trust your instincts, to accept that uncertainty is part of life and that you don't need to have all the answers before you take action. To recognize that thoughts are just mental events, no different from sounds or sensations. They don't define you, they don't control you, and they don't require your immediate attention. When you realize that you are not your thoughts, but the observer of your thoughts, everything changes. You stop being controlled by every mental suggestion. You stop reacting to every worry that pops into your head. You start choosing your responses instead of just reacting to your reactions. This is where real freedom begins, not in having all the answers, but in being okay without them, not in controlling every outcome, but in trusting your ability to handle whatever comes, not in understanding everything, but in accepting that some things are meant to be lived, not analyzed. The path forward isn't about becoming someone who never thinks or never feels confused. It's about becoming someone who can think when thinking is useful and stop thinking when it's not. Someone who can sit with uncertainty without immediately trying to solve it. Someone who can act without needing perfect information. Because here's the secret those peaceful people know. Life isn't a problem to be solved. It's an experience to be lived. And the moment you stop trying to figure it all out is the moment you finally start to understand what really matters. So here's what happens when you finally release that grip. When you stop demanding that life make perfect sense before you can feel okay about it. Everything starts to shift in ways you never expected. First, your mind gets quiet, not empty, but peaceful. You realize how much energy you were burning trying to decode every single moment, every emotion, every interaction. That mental chatter that used to run nonstop starts to settle. And in that silence, you discover something you'd forgotten. Your own voice. Not the anxious one asking 1,000 questions, but the deeper one that actually knows things without needing to think them through. Your relationships change too. You stop being the person who needs to process everything out loud, who turns every conversation into a therapy session. You become someone who can just be present with people without needing to fix or understand them. And that draws people closer because they feel safe around your energy. They don't have to walk on eggshells wondering if you're going to analyze their every word. The anxiety starts dissolving, not because your life becomes problem-free, but because you stop creating problems that don't exist. You realize how much of your stress was just mental fiction, stories you were telling yourself about what everything meant. When you stop feeding those stories, they lose their power over you. Your creativity explodes. All that mental energy you were wasting on trying to figure everything out gets redirected into actually creating things. You start having ideas again, real ones, the kind that excite you and make you want to take action, not the kind that get immediately shot down by your inner critic. Sleep becomes easier. Your mind actually gets to rest instead of replaying conversations from 3 years ago or planning out scenarios that will never happen. You remember what it feels like to have a quiet mind at the end of the day. But here's the deeper shift. You start living in reality instead of in your head. You see situations for what they actually are, not what your overactive imagination makes them out to be. This clarity changes everything. You can navigate life with precision instead of stumbling through it, blindfolded by your own thoughts. Your confidence grows because you're no longer your own worst enemy. You stop undermining yourself with endless what-if scenarios and worst-case thinking. You start trusting your ability to handle whatever comes your way, not because you can predict it, but because you know you can respond to it. The world becomes simpler, not because it changes, but because you stop complicating it. You realize most situations have straightforward solutions. Most people mean exactly what they say, and most problems resolve themselves when you stop feeding them with excessive mental energy. You become magnetic in a different way. People want to be around you because calm, decisive energy is rare. You're not draining people with your mental chaos anymore. You're not seeking constant validation or reassurance. You become a source of stability instead of stress. Your decisions improve dramatically, not because you think harder, but because you think clearer. You make choices from instinct rather than analysis, from confidence rather than fear. And those decisions feel right because they come from a place of inner knowing rather than mental calculation. This is what freedom actually looks like. Not the absence of challenges, but the presence of clarity. Not the elimination of problems, but the end of creating problems where none exist. You stop being controlled by your thoughts and start using them as tools. The person you become is someone you probably haven't met in years. Someone who trusts themselves, who moves with purpose, who isn't afraid of uncertainty, someone who lives in the present moment instead of getting lost in mental scenarios that lead nowhere. And once you taste this freedom, There's no going back. You wonder how you ever lived any other way. You see overthinking for what it really is, a prison you kept yourself in, and you'll never willingly walk back into that cell. This is your invitation to step into that reality, to stop thinking your way through life and start living your way through it. Because on the other side of needing everything to make sense isn't just peace, it's power. The power to create, to decide, to act, to become exactly who you're meant to be.